Welcome back to the shop of Wood Spun Round. This is Doug, and I am so happy to have you with me today. I have on the lathe today the largest piece of wood I've ever put on the lathe. Not the largest in weight, but the largest in diameter. This is a piece of oak. It was an oak slab. The original owner was wanting a table made, and so my dad built the table for them, and the leftover of the slab was left with him, and he gave me a big part of it. This is just one piece. I think I've got two or three others, but this is the only big one. It's 20 inches in diameter, and as you can see, it is not flat. This was quite an issue. And so we're turning it here and just trying to get the bottom established. I've got to get a general shape, but also a way to hold it so I can reverse it and get the other side turned. You can see I had it on a glue block, probably too small of a glue block, but I also didn't put enough glue on it, and so it came off at that point. And I am turning slow. I knew I would not be getting fast with this, so I knew a glue block would be fine. And when it did come off, it just dropped straight down. Quite interesting. But I've got it back on. It's the same glue block, but I used a lot more glue, and I gave it more time to set up good and solid. So went ahead and got the edge pretty well round. At least there's one small area that's round all the way around it. And came back to the bottom. You've probably noticed the headstock is turned. It's not straight. This is way too big to turn over the bedways. This is a 16-inch swing on this lathe, and this being a 20-inch platter, I had to turn it off the bed. And so I'm having also to turn in reverse. It's kind of a strange thing to have to do that. I've only done that 2 or 3 times where I had to turn in reverse. So yes, in case some of you are thinking and wanting to ask, I do have the grub screw in the chuck. And so that's important on this one particularly. It is so heavy and so big, so out of shape, that if I did not have the grub screw, I would not be able to keep that chuck on the lathe. You saw me there. I was just helping the lathe out by spinning it first, getting it spinning by hand before I turned it on. Just take some of the bog out of the motor, so I don't have that strain. It just takes a long time. Like I said, I'm turning slow. At this point, I'm probably turning about 275. It is quite slow, and honestly, it's driving me a little crazy. But with a little patience and continual sharpening of the tools, I sharpen a number of times. I've got 3 bowl gouges that I like to use, and I pulled out 2 others. I actually used 5 different bowl gouges on this one. At one time I had all 5 of them sharp, and I went through all 5 and then still had to sharpen some more. I am marking for the tenon here. It doesn't have to be real deep, but it has to be the right size so that the chuck can grab it the best. Actually, it's not a tenon, but a recess. Mark the recess. And so the jaws have to go in there and be able to open up. But it doesn't have to be super deep. I went probably a little deeper than I normally go. I went, it wasn't a 1/4 inch deep, but it was more than an 1/8. So 3/16-ish thereabouts on the recess. And I never had a problem with that recess. It was perfect. But it just takes time. I did pull out the Easy Wood tool here. Because of the slowness of turning, the Easy Wood was not the best tool. Um, I felt like it just wasn't cutting cleanly. The carbides really need a little more speed. So go back to my gouge and it works just fine. You can see there, the bottom side still has some out of shape business to it. The top side does as well. That's why it looks like it's fluctuating in and out. It is. I wanted to do this project for a couple of reasons, and I really wanted a platter that was larger than this, but I'm glad I couldn't do a larger one at this point. A larger one would have been okay. I could have gotten it done. It just would have been a lot more difficult. And I was losing patience with this one. So this was good practice for when I do get a larger uh, blank, and I can put it on the lathe and feel confident in doing it. Just know it's going to take a long time to do. I knew this was going to take a while. I just didn't realize how long. So I've got my recess, and I've gone back to working on the bottom. And I want to put a foot on this as well. I think with a platter this size especially, it's going to be real important to have a little bit of a foot. And so it doesn't have to be big. It just has to be there so that as far as looking at the bottom, it looks nice, but also it gives it just a little bit of lift off the table so it doesn't look quite so heavy. It's going to be heavy enough no matter what. This is oak, and the oak has some weight to it. For those of you who may be concerned, as far as I know, it's white oak. I don't know for sure. It wasn't marked. It was only marked oak. And it does have some knots in it. That's one issue that it has. That's part of the imbalance issue. There's one big knot kind of toward the edge. And lo and behold, this piece never does come into complete 100% balance because of the knot. I was just trying to see if I could tell by feeling it how bad it was still out of balance on the back side here. Just trying to get a nice smooth surface. And there you can see I've moved ahead a bit, and you can see I've gone with a bit of an OG shape, which is kind of normal for plates and platters. It works out really nice, but I'm starting to get a pretty nice surface on the back side here. Just kind of refining, and there's still a couple of lumps and bumps I'm working out. We're getting close to where I'm happy with the bottom side. In fact, we're sanding here. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was sanding, but using my inertia sander there, my straight-on inertia sander. I'll be making a new inertia sander pretty soon. One end I'll do this same straight, but on the other end, I want to do a 45. There are just times when having an angle would be a great benefit over having the straight. So that's what I'm going to do. I switched over here because of the size of it to the power sander. I was hoping to use the inertia sander because doing it on the opposite side, because of the system I use with the power sander, I cannot reverse my sander. I have to go forward, or the pad comes off. It's on um, a nylock, or I never can remember what that's called. Rotolock. Anyway, it's a little quarter turn plastic thing. If I reverse the drill, then the whole pad just comes off and goes across the shop. So I have to turn with the drill in forward. So just makes it a little tough. But we got it done. Here you see it's reversed. It's worked out well. I'm just knocking that glue block off. I've glued the glue block on with CA glue, medium density CA glue. And what I've found, what I've learned, is that CA will come off very easily when you go to split it. It does not have a good, doesn't have a good strength in that direction. Other than that, it holds really, really well if you give it time to set up. So you can see the center spot. That's not going to be an issue. It's going to go away. But you can see I've got a thin area there and then a really thick area. And that thick area it just takes a while. The oak is hard. I'm still having to turn fairly slow. I think at this point I get it up to, I start off still just under 300. And I might have gotten it up at the very end to about 400, 450 is all. And normally I turn bowls. At this point, I'm usually pretty close to 1,000, if not a little over. So I'm quite slow here. But as you can see, the chips are flying, and it doesn't look like I'm doing much if you look at the blank. But I'll stop here in just a minute, and you'll be able to see I've cut a pretty good amount. It's just so much of it. All right, we moved ahead a little bit again, and you can see progress is being made. I've gotten down, I've established exactly how thick my plate's going to be there up on the rim. I've gotten it down pretty nice, and looks like I've sped it up a little bit. And I'm sorry, but I lost some footage there. The file was corrupt, and so we've skipped ahead. All that turning, never did speed up until the very end. It was just tough. It was arduous. For sanding here, I think might be like at 700 maybe for the sanding. And the rim, I just wanted to do the rim kind of by hand. There were a couple of marks there, some tool marks I could not get out. That's partly because of the uneven weight distribution. And it never was running just super smooth. You can see the lathe is shaking there just a little bit. Primarily the controller. The controller sits on a little metal arm that's not super solid. It has some give to it, so it swings even more than the lathe does. Sanding is done. I've sanded all the way to 240. Now we're putting on some of the Axe tung paste. The tung oil paste, it's just a thickened tung oil, and it works tremendously. So I'll put a good coat of this completely over the bowl, front and back, and give it some time. I think I gave it 30 minutes, 35 minutes, something like that, to kind of soak into the wood. And then we're going to come back and buff it off before we go on with the process. I'm sorry I didn't show you the lid, but it is the Axe tung oil paste, what Tom calls the first step. And it just gives some richness back to the wood. You can see the color of the oak starting to come out really nicely. There is no color in this oil. It's clear, but it does bring out the natural color of the wood. I am starting, as I'm doing this, I can remember thinking how beautiful this oak truly is. Here we are with the abrasive paste. I started to say about the beauty of the wood, in my opinion, and I do the same thing. Most turners have this tendency to underrate oak. It is hard. It's hard to turn. It has its own issues with its open grain and all of that kind of thing. But just look at the beauty here. It's got the one big knot, and it's got a small knot there right in the rim. And I'll tell you, there are a couple of small splits that are due to the knots that are in it, but they were easily repairable. There was a dead knot that came out on the back side, and I did fill it with some sawdust and some CA glue. But even that does not look terrible. As I look back on it, it just looks like a little limb inclusion, which is exactly what it was. It was a small limb that died, and that the little center part of the limb fell out. It was still there. Turning slow just to work that abrasive paste in. The abrasive paste then takes it from the 240 up to around 1,000 grit, and it comes out with just a superior smooth surface that really is nice to the touch. Takes a wax finish or any other finish extremely well. I wanted this platter to be as natural as possible, so I just did the tung oil, and then the abrasive paste, and then wax. There you see I just sped it up, probably just 50 RPMs. Did that with a clean area of towel until it comes off clean. And then we go straight to wax. I just showed you the lid for the wax. This is a high carnauba content wax. Carnauba is the hardest of the natural waxes. And so that's what I'm using here. Goes on very nice. Then I'm going to let it sit for 15-20 minutes, something like that. That just allows that wax to set up again by rubbing it in the jar there with my cloth. I'm warming up that surface a little bit, making it where it comes out of the jar and gets on my rag, and then I put it on the wood, and I just let it set up. There are no solvents in this like there is in car wax, but just allow the wax to set up just a little bit, and then it buffs up so super nice. And I think I did 3 coats on here, and it works out just really, really well. One of the things about a wax finish is it doesn't hurt at all to put more on it. And so you see I go circular, I go with the grain, I go against the grain, I go circular again, just working it into the wood so that it's in the wood really, really nicely. We've allowed it to set up a bit. Now I've come back and started to buff it. At first, just very light pressure, just take off the excess, and then just building the pressure little bit by little bit. Again, I probably get up to about 700 RPMs is all. I love to buff at a much higher rate. It just seems to be easier and more effective, but this works just fine. I've put some on the back as well, and so just giving it some time, buffing it as well. You want to build up, you want to buff very lightly at first and then apply more pressure so that you can build up just a little bit of heat in there. That little bit of heat allows that wax to really set, become as hard as it can possibly be. The size of this platter and out of balance, I'm afraid I was not able to let it get as hot as I normally do. But by being patient with it, giving it time to set up, it worked out very, very nicely. Going to take it off. We're done here. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. It was a lot of fun. It was hard work. Took me probably about 6 hours that it's been condensed down to this 20 minutes or so. But I hope you've enjoyed it. This is Doug at Wood Spun Round. Until we meet again, I hope you're able to spin them round.